Okay, everybody, hello. This is, of course, Nick Dutch back again, just going through my contemplations and talking through the subject which no one in the whole face of the planet will ever fully understand, and that's obviously rather disheartening, but on the other hand, that's the way it is. If anyone turns around to you and say that they're an expert in the occult, we have to sort of like take that with a bit of a pinch of salt now, don't we? So that's why I think it is important to be perpetually in a position of discussion, debate, and thinking about the subjects which is expressed by people associated with occultism, magic, witchcraft, spirituality, and all the rest of that, and to carry on asking questions and carry on putting new ideas into the mix somehow in order to try and advance our understanding and try and get it clear cut. There was one phrase in that book which I told you about recently, The Exorcist's Handbook, which I thought was curious but also a bit glib. Okay, and that's the phrase, just because it's imaginary, it doesn't mean to say it's not real. In what context? Alright? I mean, during my younger days, when I was meeting younger occultists, there would always be people who would say, well, visualize this, visualize that, visualize the other, just visualize. As if just like sitting on your ass and imagining things would suddenly like rebalance the entire universe and bring about catastrophe upon this, that, and the other, and generate power for this, that, and the other, and make the whole world bend to your will. Obviously, such a phrase, it has to be like wrong. Intellectually, it has to be wrong, because I can sit here and I can imagine all kinds of things, I can daydream all kinds of things. It doesn't mean to say that that's going to somehow change the world or puts new energy into a complicated situation, does it now? Of course not. So obviously she was talking about her journeying. And by the word journeying, we mean going into a meditative journey in which you're trying to do something or attempting to have contact with the spirit world or a particular entity or a particular complicated situation. All right, that's the way in which she's using her language. The action of journeying appears to be something that requires a rather intense quantity of visualization, with the body like relaxed, and also so that the visualization itself is almost hyperreal, almost like a hallucination. Obviously not, it wouldn't be quite that strong, would it? But it would be almost like that because of the intensity of what's happening in the visualization, which must have active imagination components to it, namely directly making these images be conjured up in the mind, all right? But also passive and receptive, like I'd already discussed, with the use of mindfulness. So trying to get into that state of mind will be a bit of a challenge in its own right. But under what circumstances could that phrase be true? Just because it is imaginary, it doesn't mean to say it's not real. If the state of mind was, this is just me discussing it with you, okay, trying to break it down so I understand it as well as you building an understanding of it. If the state of mind was sufficiently prayerful, sufficiently targeted and focused on the particular intention, but it would have to be in that tranquil, reverent, prayerful, celestial state of mind, that, as it were, higher state of mind, the sort of state of mind you end up in a prayerful state when you've gone through the process of opening up the 7 chakras in order, using your visualization with intention, with willpower, with clarity of thought expressed to that, to the point whereby you feel open, you feel like the crown of your head is somehow open to something. That could possibly be it. Okay, I'm of the opinion that these various different brainwave frequencies are somehow key towards different levels of engagement with things of different levels, hypothetically. All right, everything is hypothetical in this world because we've got to test it by experience. And anything which is written will have a certain extent of hearsay to it, won't it? Even the like new scientific discoveries of today, in 20 years' time, would be being built on or changed, or the context of them would be changed, or the situation of it would be changed. Same with medical, language and stuff of that nature. As well as stuff associated with the physical world and quantum mechanics and the chemical world of how this, that, and the other molecules are made and the process of making molecules. All this stuff is going to change. So if anything that's written in the here and now today must have a certain component of hearsay about it. Everything. A certain component. Not necessarily entirely, not necessarily not entirely either, but a certain component of it. And I've got a cat who wants some food. Who I will give love and attention to in just a second. So, and you want to see the pussy too, so here is a pussy for you to look at because you're on the internet and therefore you want to see a nice, big, soft, fluffy, cuddly little creature who smells of fish and fresh air at the moment, which is good. Smelling of fish and fresh air is better than smelling of all kinds of other terrible things such as kebab vans and rubbish bins and some stranger's loft. He smelled of, that moldiness you get in the loft, attic, he smelt of that before. Oh my God. Okay, so let's go back to the discussion about what we would actually mean by the phrase, just because it's imaginary doesn't mean to say it's not real. Now, her point of view is that you are engaging with real, genuine entities when you are engaging with what she would call exorcism, which connects, of course, to magic, spirituality, works of faith, works of religion in its own right. All right? So, from her point of view, if something happens in her journeying, she would be assuming that it would be at least in part, the product of engaging with entities. Does that make sense? Possibly yes, but also possibly not so much. It's like when you're going through the process of learning different forms of visualization, different forms of openings and chakra openings and that sort of stuff, and different meditative and prayerful states. There's different forms of visual information which can come your way. Alright? I'll have to feed this cat in a second. And all of the states of mind that you go through somehow affects what you're capable of putting out and what you're capable of receiving. Barbara Ann Brennan suggested that the action of a healer was to modify the energy of her own energy field so that she could then do her laying on of hands type healing. Alright? I think that the modification of your state of mind must also have some kind of effect when it comes to either receiving information or putting energy, so to speak, out. And if there is like blobs of energy connected into various different places which have some kind of cognitive or willpower energy behind them and are capable of doing things, it might make sense that there was some kind of receptiveness that an individual would have to those things. Alright? When you're doing mindfulness and you're sitting down calm and relaxed and open-minded, allowing thoughts and feelings and memories to arise bit by bit, a bit like the moles coming up in a whack-a-mole game. You just look, oh, I just observe it, I recognize it, I accept the fact it's there, and I just allow it to pass. Alright, then you have another one that pops up, oh, I just recognize that, accept it's there, I allow it to pass. That's mindfulness. If you're doing that enough, and there was some kind of different energy, let's say, floating around that had some kind of ability to influence you, and you did somehow get an influence from it, one could assume, therefore, that things which appear in your visual imagination is somehow connected to the thing which is affecting you. So to a certain extent, with the more open, relaxed mindfulness state of mind, possibly as a result of having opened the chakras before you go on your visual journey, you might well be open to something. What that could be, it's difficult to say. Some magicians believe that if they just imagine that they're killing you with a sword, then it would essentially be killed. Full stop, finito, the end of arguments, and the magician has got great victory. But if the spiritual environment is in fact more complicated than that, and you don't know how much power you've actually got against the thing, or indeed the power of the thing itself, then it wouldn't make sense that you could just do your thing and that everything would suddenly work out according to plan. Which is another reason why I hate it when people turn around to you and say it works. Because what we're dealing with here must be, by definition, more complicated than the average human being can understand. And also, therefore, also the willpower and focus and all the rest of that of the individual must also be something that would be a variable skill. And even during the times when you're doing the best you can, maybe there'll be something more potentially powerful about the thing which you're trying to fight and or destroy or trying to influence, which would make it more complicated or more difficult and would possibly stop you from having total success over it. So this is another reason why using the phrase "it works" is complete hooey, isn't it? All right. Meow. So where does that leave us? I think that leaves us in a position of, number one, trying to experiment and trying to identify what particular types of visual information, either created by your own willpower or received apparently from the outside or perceived apparently from the outside, feels. Then it will be a question of rationally and logically identifying what the experience of the received or created visualization is or was, and then seeing whether there's some kind of correlation with stuff happening in the outer world. And it remains more a question of observation and attempting to conjure up in your mind deliberately specific states of mind and moods and energies, which is connected to your ability to receive and transmit, as opposed to just assuming that you can go into daydream and everything will be fine, because that would be like, you know, the attitude of a complete airhead. And you don't want the attitude of a complete airhead. You want to try and investigate and explore this stuff so you understand it, and so you can use it in your own practice, whether it's for, you know, spiritual purposes or whether it's for spiritual purposes. Okay, you know what I mean? So thinking about that phrase, it's a bad phrase because that could lead some people to think, well, I imagined it, therefore it must be true. But on the other side of things, it does appear from experience that some of the things she said is right. That your beliefs are like an operating system, and that things that come through into your visual world will be influenced by what that belief system is, whether it's been brought about by trauma or by spirituality. My old vicar from my old church decided to actually have a Beltane thing on May Day. And I went to it. Yeah, I know, a vicar holding a Beltane thing, quite funny, okay? But it was good. But during that Beltane thing, there was a moment of quiet contemplative prayer. And I got coming into my head very strongly, and I mean very strongly, a vision of the Green Man, you know, the folio face. So what did that mean? Oh, on one side of things, it's a Beltane thing, so you might assume that there's something psychological going on there. But also, it's a Beltane thing, so your mind is open to that sort of thing. Okay? And during the prayerful moment, this visualization came in really rather strong. Just as when I had my confirmation and baptism in the Anglican Church, what is now over 10 years ago, quite substantially over 10 years ago. And I had the bishop laying his hand on me and saying a prayer. I got a very powerful visualization of the dove symbol. It was the same kind of experience. with my baptism and confirmation, that could have been even him meditating upon that particular symbol and sending its meaning to me into my head. But when I was out in nature, around a campfire, and there were prayers being said and that sort of thing, and I was going into that prayerful state of mind, could it easily have been an energy of the place and of the season? An actual, like, spirit energy, so to speak, that was coming through to my perceptual consciousness. But if I had visualized it being killed, tried to visualize it being killed, would that have necessarily destroyed or dispersed the bubble of green man energy that was around there? Possibly not. Or was it that the green man energy was essentially just a seasonal thing that's just happens to grow around May Day and then declines as the rest of the year passes by? I don't know. Was it some other form of consciousness in the place masquerading as a green man? We don't know. Was it something that was in the consciousness of other people in that little prayer circle, and that I picked it up because they were meditating on it hard? And I happened to be a more receptive person, so I kind of like saw it in my head, like really, just really strongly, as if the green man's face was like right there in front of me. I don't know. But I know that that experience happened, and therefore it says something about, if there is something which appears into your visual consciousness, maybe it means something. But again, it will always be open to discussion and debate as to precisely what that is, because we won't 100% know. So, like when we're like dealing with other people, and when we look at the energy coming out of them, maybe we see something. Maybe that's just something psychological, or maybe that isn't. If that makes any sense to you. But then it's just a question of experimenting with these things and seeing whether some kind of new level of understanding can happen as a result of attempting to defeat negativity, and thus to bring about like some kind of spiritual healing to the people you're trying to influence, or the places you're trying to influence. It all gets more and more complicated the more you look at it, and I don't think you can stop and say, oh, I just did that, therefore I'm so powerful. Because another situation will come along at some point which will remind you how stupid and foolhardy and ignorant you really were. Because that's called life, all right? That's what life does to you. It teaches you that, there's limitations to your understanding of the world in the here and now. I mean, every single phase of life you go through teaches you that. You come into a new phase of life, yeah, I think I've got this, I've got this, I've got this. And after a few years, oh, right, okay, well, I've learned a lot now, and maybe I've got more to learn. And the more you do learn, the more you realize how much more you've got to learn, because you won't ever be in a position of total knowledge. Okay? However, that shouldn't stop you from experimenting, because that's what we have to do, because we should all be on the search for truth and knowledge. Have I confused you more? I hope I haven't. Hope you enjoy the coronation speech again soon.